Fair to say that law enforcement is treating this as a workplace violence.
An active shooter situation.
Several civilians inside this facility.
Of an active shooter
that have been injured.
Who will help the victims?
With over 25 years of expertise, Paul Marshall is responsible for the formation and growth of McGowan's active shooter workplace violence insurance program. Since the program's inception, he has insured over 1,500 businesses, organizations, and events throughout the United States. In the past 2 years, he has spoken at over 100 different conferences, hosted monthly webinars, interviewed with a host of news outlets, has been published in numerous magazines, and is now teaching continuing education classes all over the country. What drives him and his team? How are they helping?
McGowan, we're a program administrator, and as opposed to a agent or broker or insurance company, McGowan, we fill a little niche. I like to say it's a insurance incubator. And so what we do is we work with various risks, one being active shooter workplace violence, for example. This coverage didn't exist. There was a need. There were markets, insurance carrier risk bearers that were interested in providing the coverages. There were certainly clients that wanted the coverage, but someone had to underwrite it, and someone had to manage the process of accepting applications, marketing, underwriting each and every risk, issuing policies, collecting premiums, ultimately overseeing claims. And so that's what we do. That's what McGowan does. Active shooter workplace violence. We started a few years ago. It is one of 15 portfolio of risk products that we offer to the public. We're based in Cleveland, Ohio. We have representatives in just about every state, and we insure risks in just about every state of the country, and we're looking actually to move up into Canada. We work through retail and wholesale brokers, and we pride ourselves on top-notch service and claims handling and just being that true partner with our insurance carriers. To simplify it, there was a gap in coverage that the GL policy, general liability, commercial general liability policy, did not cover. And this was a response coverage to these tragic events. Active shooter, deadly weapon attack, mass shootings, they go by a number of different names. We hear them all too often in the news. That's the main truth. The general liability policy requires a lawsuit. So the injured party, whether it be a patron, student, family of a church or school or municipality or a restaurant chain, if a tragic accident occurs, they need to file a lawsuit. And lawsuits are expensive. They're sensational. They cost a lot of money. So we created a product to respond day one, dollar one, to help the victims recover and the communities recover. And so the first part of our active shooter workplace violence programs is that day one coverage. So we will reach out to the victims, immediately will provide counseling services, medical expenses, funeral coverages. If there's deaths, we'll provide death benefits to the beneficiaries. And this helps an organization, a hotel, a cinema, university, school, church, etc., respond in an act of kindness, in an act of humanity. That's one of the big differences that we're seeing just in recent months of the development of this product. The other part of the product, or the second part I might say, is the increased expenses that a organization will incur in the event of these tragic accidents. For one, there could be a massive business income loss. The Aurora Cinema shooting, the cinema was closed for 6 months without revenues. Virginia Tech spent millions of dollars refurbishing the hall and on public relations and crisis management to help, make the public feel safe to come back to the university. We're seeing this time and time again where organizations spend a lot of money. City of Fort Lauderdale Airport spent over $750,000 reuniting the luggage with the passengers. It's an odd expense, but that's a lot of money. So these expenses are reimbursed for the organization to help, keep them being an organization. One example of this not happening would be the Pulse nightclub shooting, where Pulse nightclub doesn't exist anymore. Literally, the business was ended. A wonderful business serving the community was ended because of a mass shooting. So these risks are real, and so we like to feel we help organizations offset these exposures. The third part is the third-party liability, where many times these tragic events have large lawsuits, expensive lawsuits. And at that point, no organization is asking what is enough insurance. They're asking how much insurance do we have, and do we have enough? So while our primary coverage to any general liability policy, meaning we're first dollar, we insulate the general liability policy and excess coverages of these large lawsuits. So those three basic parts make up our active shooter workplace violence program as standard coverages. And as time goes on, we're being asked to pick up various exposures, such as tear down, rebuild, and costs for memorials. I've been in insurance for 25 years, and most of the time we've been insuring healthcare organizations in the event that someone gets hurt, a victim, if you will, maybe medical malpractice or abuse or neglect, etc. And so we insure organizations in the event an accident happens, something bad happens to someone, and we need to go out and say we're sorry. We need to pay for damages. We need to help the organization help on the public relations side of things. So a part of this coverage already exists. The shooting component of it is kind of erupted just recently, as we know, where the attacks became less terroristic type or a terror type attack, such as the Boston bombing or 9/11, into more of a domestic terror attack, a deadly weapon attack, workplace violence, where these things are erupting, where I feel that the social norm of society has changed recently. And I don't know if the world has changed because of the U.S. or if the U.S. has changed because of the world. Those things are debated. Certainly no country is immune to this, and that we've seen these horrible, dreadful attacks and violent events occur everywhere. In Ohio, I remember distinctly thinking about this when we insured a number of healthcare facilities, and in 1 year, within a span of months, there were 3 healthcare facilities that had tragic active shooter workplace violence events. These policies had to have a lawsuit to respond, to help reach out and help the victims. And as I sat back and I said, well, we need to help the victims. Unfortunately, more and more of these events were happening. Schools and churches and Boston bombings. And there was one theme of, well, who's taking care of the victims? Who's helping the organization heal from these? Because I know that traditional insurance was not responding in a way that we would want. That's day $1 one, because of this. So I did a little bit of research, and while there were some older workplace violence policies, they weren't complete. They had some coverages out there, and then there were some policies available in London market, the Lloyd's of London, but they needed a little tweaking as well. They needed a little bit broader coverage, less exclusionary wording. The example definition of weapon was pretty tight, and so we needed to expand that to include vehicles and just about any instrument that's used in a deadly weapon attack, right? Including drones. So we expanded that wording. We wanted to make sure that coverage responded to any type of violent act, regardless of the number of casualties. And so we put, I wrote a policy up, and we went to several markets to saying, hey, would you back this? And a number of markets said, yeah, we feel this is a really appropriate coverage. And so that's how these policies were kind of born. And so we took it to the market. We announced it to our partner brokers throughout the country, which we work with tens of thousands of distributors, agents, and brokers, wonderful partners throughout the country. And they felt it was a very applicable coverage. They took it to their clients, and their clients said, yes, this is something that's, quote, this keeps me up at night. And so when we hear that as a program manager, an insurer, we know that we're answering, we're filling a void, filling a gap. And so we were off. We launched the product and received tremendous amount of attention from the media, whether it be Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, Insurance Journal, Risk and Insurance Magazine, about launching this particular product, and had lots of questions similar. And then there were points along the way that galvanized, our why, that made me and the team understand that while we're creating an insurance product to fill a need, a financial loss, we're also answering the question of who will help the victims. And I say that because those are some very powerful words where I heard them. I did not make them up, but a mother who her child was involved in a shooting in Cleveland. Unfortunately, the young girl was paralyzed and in a wheelchair bound for the rest of her life. And someone had told them, you're going to have to sue the school district in order to be compensated for this loss. Because the traditional insurance just doesn't pay out monies. There has to be potential liability, etc. And so that's what happened. They sued the school district. The lawsuit went on for years, as you can imagine. The mother trying to take care of the daughter and therapies and the expenses of that. And the jury comes out with their verdict. They heard both sides. And fortunately for the insured, unfortunately for the victim, the jury ruled on behalf of the organization, saying they couldn't have prevented this. And while that may have been so, we still had a mother and child, and the child paralyzed. And so the mother asked the question, and the news reporters were in the room, and they reported on it. And I spoke to that reporter firsthand a week later, and he told me the story of the mother just asking the question, who will help the victims? And if it wasn't powerful enough, he picked up on her vernacular, her verbiage. And while there was one single victim in this scenario, she used a plural form. And he couldn't help but realize that she was talking about who was going to help the past victims, the current victims, the future victims of these tragic accidents if the current insurance and legal system is set up not to help them. And that was a very powerful moment for me and my team. I think we became very strongly committed that this is something beyond insurance, but something that we're helping victims, communities, parishes, churches nonprofit organizations, heal themselves. And so that was a big power moment for us. It really galvanized our work and what we do. Education, that's key. We're raising awareness. We're educating on this new product, which we have to. This product didn't exist a couple years ago. And so I'm speaking to really anyone who wants to listen to me, which a lot of people amazingly want to listen to me about this topic. We've kind of put ourselves out there as one of the leaders in this line of coverage, and I think that comes from processing and managing and speaking to hundreds of risk and exposures and agents and insureds every month. And so we learn from them. I feel we're doing a lot. We're probably doing the most of anyone in the country, and that's because we're speaking to 200-300 risks people per month. Every week we're traveling someplace, teaching classes and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think we're probably on the forefront of that in the insurance world. One of the evolutions that we've come up with was initially we were having people work with a tested service provider, which was great, a crisis responder. But now it's evolved where, as we're bringing on 50 to 100 clients everywhere in the country, it's difficult to do the threat assessments everywhere in the country immediately. So we've reached out to local networks of local service providers all over the country. And a lot of these are the first responders, the police departments and firemen, the sheriff departments, who are doing an incredible job. Department of Homeland Security, I just spoke with them at a conference, and they're offering threat assessments to anyone who asks. And so I think that's the key, is the awareness that it's okay to have a sheriff or police in your building and talking to your employees about run, hide, fight, or ALICE training, or basically how are we going to respond if an active shooter situation or an act of workplace violence arises. What's our initial response? And if we can get people from the fright phase into a flight or fight phase, right? So there's a fright where people initially are locked up and they don't know what to do. If we can move people very, very quickly through mental training, right? That I need to stay calm and move and work the plan. The plan is, whether it be as simple from the FBI, run, hide, fight, I think lives will be saved. And so that means a lot to me. I mean, I with having 6 kids myself and a number of them in school, I want to make sure if an event were to happen that they get home safely, as I do with our clients and friends and employees and staff. So education is very important. And that kind of comes with the job that we're talking about insurance. And then naturally, we talk about how to prevent these events from ever happening. And so talking to people about what to do in the event of a deadly weapon attack is needed and very fulfilling part of our job and our mission. So yeah, I think we're making places safer on it every day. And that's another why, why are we doing this? Why do we get up every day? Why do I hit the road just about seemingly every day in a different city and speaking about this? A big part is we're making these organizations and the individual people safer. And that makes us feel good.